Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Financial Services Roundtable today. Before we get started, I want to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We're recording this discussion, and so we'll be able to send a link out after the recording this afternoon. All attendees are in listen-only mode. However, at any point during the presentation, you can submit a question by typing it into the questions pane in the control panel in the upper right-hand corner. We'll collect these questions and we'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of the open discussion. If you submitted a question during the registration process, we'll answer as many of those as we can throughout the open discussion and during the Q&A at the end. We have a Humio Solution one-pager summary that's available that you can access through the control panel if you'd like to download that before the end of the event. For today's workshop, we'll do a brief introduction and we will speak to how each of our guests are using log data within their organization, followed by an open discussion with the panelists, and we'll wrap it up with a Q&A session. Before we get started, I'd like to apologize that our CEO, Gita Schmidt, ended up not being able to moderate today's discussion. However, we have a great replacement for her, Humio's Executive Vice President, Morten Graham. Morten works closely with all of our partners, including IBM, and he is heavily involved with a lot of our larger accounts to make sure that they have what they need for a successful deployment. So let's get started. Morten, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm really sorry that Gita couldn't join us today, but I'm sure she's here in spirit, and we'll do our best to keep the conversation interesting and relevant. We've never been more challenged when it comes to observing our system landscapes, whether it's about security, keeping the application or infrastructure running. The landscapes are changing. The move towards more automation and an increase in digitalization. The increase for speed and agility all imposes an exponential growth in the data that we need to observe. This forces us to rethink our strategies and tools when it comes to observability. We're seeing an increase in demand for real-time access to data and more flexibility when people are searching and investigating that type of data. So I think the scene for today is set for an interesting discussion, and we have with us some very interesting people joining the panel for today's session. First, I'd like to thank my co-host and our panelists for being a part of this event. They're all very busy and their time and participation means a lot to us in Humio. With that, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Jörg Klein-Kong, CTO Integrated Account Team at Deutsche Bank at IBM. Jörg, tell us a bit about your role at IBM and how long you've been in the industry, and a little about the services IBM offers that benefits the financial services vertical.
Thanks, Morten. Yeah, Jörg Klein-Kong, Executive Architect at IBM. As said, I'm lead architect of the integrated account team for Deutsche Bank, but working for IBM. In the so-called integrated accounts, IBM manages the business with its most important customer globally. That means within one team. So I'm working in the banking industry since more than 20 years now for IBM since 2007. Most of the time in the consulting business for different banks. The financial services vertical is, of course, one of the most important verticals for IBM. If not the most important one, we support all the largest banks globally. So what we do, IBM put much focus on AI, blockchain, quantum computing, and clouds. You know, with Watson, our AI platform, we help the company to bring artificial intelligence in their processes to make them smarter, act faster, and achieve more in the same time. With the IBM blockchain, we offer companies a very fast and secure way to exchange data. We are very strong in trade finance business for banking, supply chains, networkings. A lot of pressure for the time being is quantum computing. So we have to achieve scientific breakthroughs to trying to solve problems that are not possible with computers today. And of course, the whole world is trying to transform into the cloud. So we have a large cloud community, cloud computing, for providing fast access to our services and data. And last but not least, we have a large consulting IBM services group, and help companies to implement our innovative technologies like AI, blockchain, cloud, and quantum.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Our panelist for the conversation today, we have Eugenia Polenko joining us. He's the head of DevOps at Global Markets Technology at Deutsche Bank, specifically in the Department of Fixed Income Currencies. And we have Gavin Grissamore. He's the VP and head of Information Security at Stash. Eugenie, can you start by telling everyone a little about yourself and Deutsche Bank?
Yep, hello everyone. My name is Evgeny. I'm working for Deutsche Bank. I'm working for financial industry for almost 17 years. In Deutsche Bank, I'm leading DevOps, the team, and my team is providing DevOps services for the FIC, Fixed Income and Currencies division. We are mostly working with the developers located in Russia. We have Russia Technology Center, which is almost 1,500 people big. And we are providing services like IT for IT. We are working between the development team and operation teams who are working on the ground, like Unix assays, DBAs, network firewalls, and so on and so forth. So for dev team, it's very easy to make any changes in the infrastructure environment. They need just to raise a ticket to my team, and then we will handle this depending on the ticket. We will handle this with the relevant team, relevant request system, and give application team the result back. We are also providing SDLC service for the FIC division, whole SDLC stack from source code to the deployment tool, in-house made. Yeah, that's why we found the log storage solution very applicable. So that's all from my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Gavin, can you introduce yourself as well and talk a bit about your role at Stash and also a little bit about what Stash is?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Gavin Grissamore. I'm the VP of Information Security at Stash, and I also run our IT teams as well as our dev and operations teams for our platform. Our platform is entirely on AWS cloud services. And a little bit about Stash is we are a fintech company, fintech startup that focuses on an all-in-one type of financial subscription that is available for Americans in the United States. We have over 5 million customers, and we help our clients save, bank, and invest using our platform. We use log data very heavily in our engineering department. Every single department is analyzing log data in some capacity, but particularly for our teams, we find it very valuable on the operations side and the security side. And with regards to threat hunting, which is something that's very valuable for us to do proactive hunts and proactive engagements looking for adversaries in our system. And Humio is a big part of that. To talk a little bit about some of our cloud stack, we run a service-oriented architecture. Our architectures are decentralized across many, many different services, and those services are event-driven. We use Kafka on the back end to publish and consume events, and that observability is also very important for us to be able to troubleshoot problems, but also it makes it rather difficult because you don't have a centralized place to go when things go wrong. So observability is very important for us in that service-oriented architecture, and it makes our ops teams and security teams, that much more. Can be very challenging for us. So that's a little bit about me and Stash, and thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, let's get into some more. We'll get into some more depth questions for our panelists. Dork, would you like to kick off the first question?
Sure, Martin. Evgeny, can you speak to how your IT infrastructure planning changed over the last few years? What have been the biggest influences around the change, and what have been the biggest challenges to this planning process?
Oh, that's pretty easy, I would say. So how we planned the budget and infrastructure in past, it's 5 to 10 years back. We were doing bottom to top exercise. So application team created a list of infrastructure they will need for the next year: servers, databases, I don't know, software, and so on and so forth. Then this list, we translated this list to money. That's okay, but then infrastructure teams translated this list. For example, they translated list of servers into the racks, cooling facilities, and so on and so forth. So that was not just money budget. We also required to plan cooling, ventilation, data space, and all this stuff. Now, what changed during last 5 years? The cloud solutions came into play, and now we don't need to think that 20 cores, that means physical server, that means, I don't know, for example, 20 servers mean the rack, mean kilowatts of energy, cooling, and space in the data center. We just need to know that 20 cores will cost us such and such money, and we can book it easily in GCP, in AWS, or anywhere else, and we just need to book some cost into budget, and we don't need to think about all these facilities and all this stuff. So from my view, that's the major game player during last 5 years. So to do budget exercise, we think less about data centers and how we will fit our needs into the data centers, and we just need to have some money to purchase this infrastructure as a service from cloud provider. We still have on-prem infrastructure because we cannot get rid of this, but this cloud push is very, let's say, very efficient and exciting.
So the cloud makes your planning process much more easier as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Evgeny. Gavin, same question to you. How has your IT infrastructure planning changed over the last few years? What have the biggest influences?
Considering Stash has only been around for the last 5 years, we have built our entire infrastructure out that's been cloud native from the beginning. But the biggest thing that I think has changed as we have grown is we've gone from a monolithic code base where everything is sort of in one application, so to speak, moving that to the service-oriented architecture that I talked about, and providing event-driven infrastructure planning. But when you start to break services up and move them into different cloud areas, you might have a development environment, you might have a staging QA environment, and you have production. There's lots of services to keep track of. So configuration management is very important, and cloud posture management is very important. And that's really what has been the planning mechanism for making sure that we have the right capacity for each particular service. We have the right configuration so that these services can communicate and talk with each other. We have hardening and security standards built in from the beginning. To do this, we leverage infrastructure as code, particularly Terraform, to make this happen so that our developers can build their application infrastructure right along with their code. So a lot of planning and standardization has gone into that process so that we can not reduce speed, but also introduce secure configurations for when they're adding new workloads to the cloud. So that's really been the main focus kind of over the last year to 18 months, and will continue to be the focus.
Very interesting. Many thanks, Gavin. Martin, back to you.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question on the what we were talking about, Kevin. So from an observability perspective, what have been the biggest challenges in moving from the monolith to a more cloud-native setup?
I think there's many challenges. So I mentioned that event-driven architecture. That is one mechanism that we use for services to communicate with each other. We can publish events to Kafka, and then we can have other services sort of subscribe to those events. But that puts a lot of pressure on Kafka, as far, not just from an operational perspective, but observability perspective. And when we're using things like cloud data, we found it to get the right observability, we have to do a lot of logging. We have to log at the application layer. We have to log at the Kafka layer, and we have to combine kind of application performance monitoring with our logging data to troubleshoot issues. And I think that's the sort of the biggest challenge, is you're continually adding new services to your stack. You're becoming more and more decentralized, and now your problem is sort of scaling as you grow, instead of just throwing everything in one code base. Now it's easier and faster for our developers to push out new services. The speed of deliverability is increasing, but as you scale, that observability problem can be quite challenging if you don't have the right mechanisms in place to be able to troubleshoot issues for our operations team. And it can be quite difficult from a security perspective to pin down exactly where the root cause of the issue might be.
So very interesting perspective on that. Has that put like different requirements on the tools that you're using for observability, or have you done some changes in that way?
I think so, because when we first sort of started, we treated application performance monitoring and some basic logging was sort of all we needed when we were working with that one code base. But now, as you start to provision your own infrastructure for your given services, now the entire stack sort of needs their own observability requirements. The application needs to have observability from a logging and a metrics perspective. That container needs to, as far as process is concerned, what is it running on? That has to have observability. Your network, or in Amazon's case, the VPCs, we need to be able to communicate between different networks. So observability there is important. So when a client, i.e., an iOS, Android, or web application is making a request inbound, we have to trace that request all the way down to the service through our proxies. And you have to have observability and logging at every single layer.
Cool. Thank you, Kevin. Eugenia, I also have a follow-up question for you. I mean, you're in a hybrid setup. Has that, being on the move with a lot of things to the cloud, but at the same time, kind of being forced still to have a lot of systems on-prem, has that given you guys some specific or special challenges in the way you observe things?
Yep. Similar to what Gavin was saying, move to cloud is very nice for the developers, but it's really tough time for the operation teams, because you just don't know where the application is running. You don't know where to look at the logs and so on and so forth. So centralized log solution can help a lot in this situation, because you can feed the logs to the centralized solution either from on-prem infrastructure as well as cloud infrastructure. And as operation team, you can identify quickly and easily where your application is running. And sometimes you don't even need this. You just need to see that logs are fine, irrespective of where application is running, in which AZ or whatever. It's fine. I don't need to check anything. So the main challenge here for us is, I would say, discipline, because we need to educate every single developer team that, guys, it's not on-prem. You cannot just drop a log somewhere on a file system and forget about it. Here's the log ingester. Please put all your logs here. Otherwise, we are not able to operate with your application. So for me, I would say that's a discipline for the development team, because they were excited as well as many others. Here's the cloud. You can bring quickly your application into cloud, but still you need some discipline, because we need the information to run your application in production. And yeah, that's the challenge.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So one of the things I hear about when I'm out amongst prospects and customers is the amount of data you're logging. And I have another question for you guys, because when you're thinking about the amount of data that you potentially could log, and I know there's a lot of companies that are kind of trying to filter out a lot of things. Have you ever experienced a situation or an incident, whether it's security operations or applications, where you didn't have the data available because you didn't collect it for some reason? And what impact could that have on your time to investigate and kind of recover and finding the root cause for that incident? And if you haven't been in that situation, it's great, and then you can just say that. But it's a question for both of you, and Eugenie, you can start. Have you ever been in a situation like that, or?
Yep, unfortunately, and honestly, that caused financial charges for Deutsche Bank, because it was a situation where we were unable to provide regulatory with the evidence, and evidence was actually in the log files that we used such and such rates because of the log retention, actually. So there was no log files because retention was about 1 year or so, and there was an investigation on the event that happened years ago. So yes, this situation is easily possible, especially with the financial sphere, because, for example, in some countries like Russia, Poland, Turkey, and some other stuff, you need to keep information about FX deals and so on just indefinite, just forever. And you need to be able to provide this to regulatory. In some countries, that 10 years. In Germany, I believe that 7 years, depending on the information type. So yes, we were in this situation, and I was looking for the logs. I was indexing all the tapes we had in place, and that's not a funny situation, honestly.
No, I could imagine. And what about you, Gavin? Have you had some kind of situation like that as well, or have you been?
Unfortunately, yes. From a security perspective, I actually this was prior to my experience at Stash, but I was involved in a security incident where we were going back and looking at a data exfiltration type of event, and packet capture from a network perspective is very valuable to see what was the network traffic looking like at that particular time, and the organization was only able to log 3 days worth of packet capture, and unfortunately this was the 4th or 5th day after it happened. So you start to, not only do you have packet capture, now you have to go back and look at other types of logs. So you're looking at net flow, you're looking at flow logs to try to determine what happened, and it's just not the same level of observability. And organizations are constantly making those trade-offs, particularly with that type of log, because it's so high velocity. You start to look at, okay, well, we can't keep packet capture, so let's do net flow. Okay, well, net flow is also kind of a lot, so let's only log certain regions. Okay, now that region is getting big, let's start to filter it out to only these IP addresses, or these known sources. And then you start to make those trade-offs, and then before you know it, you needed those logs that you need for a particular incident, because you don't know what you're going to need in a security incident. So a lot of effort is being put into logging more, so you don't have to make those trade-offs and do that filtering in the first place.
Cool, thank you. Gavin, just to continue on that path, can you tell us how having access to real-time unlimited log data helps you gain that efficiency to optimize processes when it comes to managing and securing complex environments?
Yes, I think that since the developers are the primary drivers of building and maintaining a lot of the infrastructure, at least at Stash, they love logs, whether it's directly or indirectly. They're going to want to log a lot, and they're not necessarily concerned about log spikes or extra concerns of data until the operation team sort of go back to them and say, hey, maybe you're logging too much. So having unlimited log data and not having a cap there allows for that lack of filtering to take place. We can just log what we need to, standard out, write what you need to, and we can get that ingested. But also when errors happen and spikes happen, we're able to consume that information as well, because those are usually unforeseen events. So we get to see that in real time, and then our operations team, for example, might say, hey, we're seeing a real large spike in errors, which might be a large spike in log data coming in. Our operations teams can see that and respond immediately, and then either try to figure out if we're erring out on the application layer or if it's some other type of job or operation. But it allows us to respond much faster when that data is real time, and it reduces the worry that developers, don't have to pick and choose what they think is going to be important in the future.
And what do you think about? I mean, what is the implication of having the real time? Versus if you had, data available 2 to 5 minutes later, or even more latency?
The data is very valuable in real time because we can put alerting around it. So this can be everything from looking for spikes in error rates so that we can go and troubleshoot that. It also is very valuable when you're looking at like proxy appliances. We have a proxy application that is logging all the request data to Humio, and though the data coming in is directly from our customers, so our clients are typically iOS, Android, and web clients, and being able to respond and see that proxy information in real time, it's great for not only development, because you can kind of tail that and start to work through the requests and see if there's any errors, but also if you're operating this application, having that information in real time is extremely valuable because you can respond, and a customer is likely not going to be impacted if you can respond faster. If you have delayed logs up to 10 minutes later, now that delays your response by 10 minutes. If you put in a fix or if you put in something else, you might have to wait another 10 minutes to kind of see that information trickle in. So when you're thinking about that delay, it sort of magnifies itself with every change that you make. And if it's real time, you can respond accordingly, much faster.
Cool, thank you. And the same question for you, Eugenio?
Yeah, I would second to Gavin because, for example, we are using logging facility for the deployment. And during the weekend, my team is doing deployments for many applications. And these applications multiplied by components in each applications. And there are thousands of components that need to be deployed, started, and so on and so forth. In case you have delay, 5-minute delay per 100 application means 500 minutes. So in case you don't have real time, you don't have a control actually on your infrastructure. You don't have good control. So logging should be, and in case you have 5 minutes delay, then you will get back to the old console times, and you will go to the console, tail -f, and you will then check real logs in real time, but using console. So real time is important because with real time you can see that application is running, and you can understand that no actions required, or other way around, some errors here and we need to redeploy or to do something else. In case you have a delay, this delay will be multiplied by number of components and by number of applications, and it's just not acceptable in case you have just a couple of hours to deploy the whole FX stack, for example.
Thank you very much, Eugene.
Evgeny, can we talk a little about future planning? Can you share a little about how digital transformation initiatives and remote banking demands are impacting your future planning for your department?
We are honestly, we don't have a private banking, I'm working in fixed income and currencies, which is part of IB. We are not retail, and we are not working with retail customers. We are working with other companies, and we are providing trading facilities for Deutsche Bank traders. Not sure if I can answer this well, honestly.
Okay. Do you have some opinion about your critical resources and tools you currently utilize to increase the speed of application delivery?
I think that in general, the tools are more or less similar across all the companies. You need to keep a source code somewhere. It's I believe in all companies, it's majority of companies that should be Git storage, whether it's Bitbucket or GitLab or whatever. So you need to keep your source code. Okay, you need to build your source code, whether you use TeamCity, Jenkins, Bamboo. So that doesn't matter actually. You need to track your tasks. Redmine, Jira, there are plenty of tools, and they are very similar. So I think that more or less all the developers working at the same velocity, depending on the skills, but they are working on the same velocity. What you need to do is to create a pipelines. So from the commit to the deployment, you need to decrease the time from the commit to the deployment, and that's in your hands. That in our hands, actually, in my team hands. So we are creating pipelines for the developers to quickly commit, run the test, and be able to deploy to production just right before the commit. There are some bureaucracy, there are some change management, and so on and so forth. And now we are working on automating that part, because you cannot just deploy to production anything. So you need to create a pipeline. That's of course, it's a very obvious advice, and that's not a silver bullet. But without a pipeline, without an automation from the commit to the deployment, you're screwed. Actually, you will not win the game. Also, you need to include security check in this pipeline, because that's also very important, and we are also working on this. So static code analysis, binaries analysis, SQL injection, web injection. I believe Gavin can elaborate on this topic. So in your pipeline, you need to have all the steps from the commit to integration, UAT testing, and packages ready to production. And depending on your organization, production deployment should be either scheduled or one click after the change management bureaucracy.
Okay, yeah, this is obviously the ideal solution. So do you have this in the bank, a one-click deployment?
Yes, so we do have, and that's in-house made. That's made in my team, and yes, that works. That this is a combined solution from in-house made and Ansible, and together it works really well. So we really can deploy almost whole stack in just one go.
Oh, very good. Congratulations. Thanks, Evgeny. Gavin, similar question for you. So can you share a little about how digital transformation initiative, remote workforce, remote banking demands are impacting you?
Yeah, remote work is definitely top of mind, particularly for IT operations, but also security. So when we look, unfortunately, COVID-19 put a lot of us at working from home at the beginning of March, or maybe even earlier. And that puts a lot of strain on existing VPN type of solutions. VPN solutions also suffer from some security weaknesses because they work at a network layer. So if someone joins a VPN, they now have usually network access back to a primary office location or something similar to that. And then now, if a endpoint becomes compromised, they have potentially access back to the network, whether it's an on-prem network like an office or a cloud network like within AWS. So that's the big challenge. I think when a lot of folks started to work from home, now you start to saturate those VPN connections. Maybe organizations didn't have the bandwidth to be able to kind of manage that. So that was an immediate problem kind of from day one, is everyone expects to work from home. They're using video conferencing and they need to be on a VPN. Lots of bandwidth. So you need to make upgrades rather quickly to that. Also looking into VPN-less type of solutions, I think is another area that we're focusing on. Is, there's been a lot of talk lately about zero trust and software-defined perimeter technologies. These are nice because you don't just have to kind of grant full network access. You can specify authentication mechanisms for a particular application. Could be an internal application, could be a SaaS application. And then that is all being orchestrated from a centralized place, and you can give access based on your group policies or however you're managing your internal directory. So it's more convenient because if your organization suffers from VPNs that slow your network connection down, this is a way to kind of resolve that. It's also an increase in security, but it's also very nice from a security and an observability perspective, because we can send those logs to a centralized place. We can see and have an audit trail of who's logging in, who's accessing what application, where are they logging in from. All that type of stuff is very valuable. Also, there's a large dependency now on endpoint visibility. So in the office type of environment, you probably have, or at least from a security team's perspective, you have security scanners, you have stuff that's happening at the proxy level for the office. You've built a lot of these sort of network technologies and tools. And then now all of a sudden, when someone goes remote, you have no visibility anymore. So the visibility now gets pushed to the endpoint because, for us, at Stash, we have, 270 some odd full-time employees, and then another 150 some odd contractors that work for the company. So now instead of, 1 or 2 or 3 office networks, you have 400. Everyone's home is now, an office network, and all the observability has to go onto the endpoint. So now you have to be able to see what requests are being made, DNS, intrusion detection, both in and outbound of that particular endpoint or computer. And all of that data has to get shipped somewhere. You can't just write a log file and then push it to a syslog server that might have been on your network. You have to do it in more secure ways. So even shipping logs and shipping data becomes challenging because you have to have secure channels. You have to be ready for bursts of log traffic to get it to places, and that's a big challenge. So your observability pattern shifted rather quickly, going from like a network sort of defined perimeter to all of a sudden everybody being decentralized, and the focus is on the endpoint. So I think that's the largest challenge, particularly with digital transformation that we sort of have seen over the last 5 months, and one of the bigger challenges for remote working.
Many thanks, Kevin. Morten, back to you.
Thank you. Eugenie, can you talk a bit about how observability impacts the capability to deliver high quality customer experience at Deutsche Bank?
Well, actually, the usual story. The more logs you have, the better you operate the environment. Because, for example, when you some of our applications are working in co-locations. That means the servers are located on the exchange. They are connected to the exchange network directly, and actually the trading happens on these servers. There are trading algorithms working on the servers, taking the data from the exchange and doing the trades. That's not a human doing the trades. In case, but all these trades are transferred to Deutsche Bank network and booked and cleaned and done all the back office stuff. So in case we have some issues with such setup, it's very important to have observability from all the pieces of infrastructure and software. We need to have logs from the application itself, from the server, from the switch, from the router, from the back office, and so on and so forth. In case you have all these logs, and in case you have it in one place, then you can identify what caused the issue easily. 2 years ago, I believe there was a MiFID II requirements, and due to these requirements, we need to have all the clocks in sync. Because before MiFID II, you may have some drift in your clocks on the servers. Now MiFID II defines that all the clocks need to be in sync, and there is some millisecond drift allowable. And that helps a lot now, because we know that all the clocks are in sync, and we can and if we have we have the logs in central place, we can search them easily. We can see some spikes, for example. We can see that these errors in application, and at the same time we can see packet drops on the switch. Then we can link all this together and find that actually the cable was not seated well, and there was a sound in the server room which shake the connector, and that caused packet drops, and packet drops caused some issues with application. So when you have all the logs in one place, then you can just quickly identify this in a minute. If you don't, then you can spend hours on this, honestly, because there are different departments. Application support is here, server support is there, network support is a third company, and to get all of them in one call, that's challenging. But we have a logs, and we don't need actually to bring everyone in. We can just open the UI, couple of clicks. Your problem is here.
Awesome. Thank you. And Gavin, can you answer the same question?
Absolutely. So I think that providing high quality customer experiences, obviously important to, a startup company like us. And observability is really important. For example, if you use a customer trying to log into the platform, there's a lot of places where a customer might have difficulty gaining access to the platform. They might have tried their username and password too many times, and they're getting rate limited. It might not be the customer. It could be a bot or someone else trying to log in and stuff their credentials. So they're getting blocked by our bot management or our web application firewall for some reason. We could have an issue at a load balancer level. We could have an issue at a DNS level. We could have an issue at the actual login endpoint itself, and that could be returning an error. The proxy application that sits in between could be failing on that endpoint, or we could have a larger failure. So the observability is important because there's so many things in the chain of a particular request, and this is just something as simple as a customer needs to log into their application. So being able to kind of go to and pinpoint that very quickly is something that's important. Everyone knows that they need to go to one particular place. Their information is going to be there, and having it be real time, they know they can kind of see the requests coming in, and we can troubleshoot a lot faster. But having everything in one place and having it be in real time is the key. So that's sort of an impact that we see on the customer experience side.
Thank you, Gavin. I think it's time that we start looking at some of the go to the Q&A session and look at some of the questions that have come in through from some of the participants during the presentation. So the first question I want to ask you guys is, if you migrated from another log management platform prior to using Humio, what was that process like, and what were the main reasons for switching or augmenting your existing solutions? Eugenie, if you can start, and then we can go to Gavin afterwards.
Okay, so can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. If you migrated from another log management platform prior to using Humio, what was that process like? And what were the main reasons for switching or augmenting existing solutions?
Okay, we used ELCA stack, and we have Splunk, and we're still using this. So the main reason for us is the cost, actually. ELCA, in theory, it's free, and yes, you can just download and install it. And by the way, I'm not taking into the account infrastructure which is used for logging solution, because you need this anyway, irrespective of what you are using, ELCA, Splunk, Humio, whatever. So let's stick on ELCA. It's working pretty well, but it cost the human who is working on its support. Maybe we done something wrong, but our installation of ELCA required care every single day, and you need to set up this, you need to check this, you need to configure this properly to handle their situation when you have your primary server down. You need to configure replicas, and you need to keep an eye on this. With Humio, I would say we just set and forget. We use set and forget, and also why we like Humio, because Humio use Kafka to send the data, to actually send the events between Humio nodes and during the event ingestion. So we were able to reuse infrastructure that we already have. And that's why I would like to use Humio. Honestly, I would like to use Humio as a service, but due to some regulatory requirements, I installed this on-prem, because I cannot transfer the data that's currently stored in Humio. I cannot transfer it outside of the perimeter. So you can use your self-hosted solution if you have a hands, and hands incurs the cost. So it's just a question of cost, actually, for me.
Okay, thank you, Eugenia. And Gavin, can you elaborate a bit on this?
Sure. Yeah, I think the ease for us with regards to the migration is we separated the log storage and analysis from the delivery of the logs, and we had a fairly sophisticated way of shipping logs, but it can vary depending on what technologies you're using. So we're heavy users of Amazon, and we want to send lots of data. So do we need to use something like AWS Firehose to be able to take that data, store it in an S3 bucket? Do we want to for archival? Are we using something like Logstash or FileBeat or FluentD or something like that? You can use all those mechanisms and transition your log storage from sort of one provider to another. You can also use them both in tandem with each other. So the migration can be very helpful if you're going to be using something like Splunk or Elasticsearch or Loggly or Sumo Logic or whatever your preference is. If the deliverability is sort of separated, you can send the data to another endpoint, and that can kind of aid with the migration of that. So that's sort of what we did. We like to use the open source Elastic products for the delivery. We also like to use FluentD and FluentBit where we can, when we integrate with Kubernetes and running that as a daemon set so that we can log that information. And then that configuration just sits right with our cluster, sends it up to Humio, and you're good to go. But you could easily send it or point it to other locations. So I think that's my biggest recommendation, is look at how your log delivery platform looks right now, and tailor that and kind of separate it out from how you want to deal with the storage and the analysis.
Cool. Thank you very much. So the next question, this could be for you, Gavin. Can you share any tactics or processes you put in place to meet compliance requirements?
Sure. I touched on configuration management quite a bit, and With regards to cloud, there's numerous tools that can assist with kind of cloud posture management, but that's really kind of the first primary thing that we use to make sure that we're adhering to a lot of the compliance requirements. Is the large benefit of using cloud services is you can get, not only can you make changes via API, you can read and get configuration information via their API. So there's all kinds of services that will align particular types of controls to what your posture looks like in the cloud. And we are PCI certified, so PCI has a series of technical controls. We use tools to evaluate our cloud environment, and then we map them to those particular types of controls, and then we look at that continuously to kind of look for drift. So once you get to the point where your configuration posture matches the particular controls that you have set, then it's as simple as looking for drift in that configuration, and it makes it a lot easier than just looking at you know, thousands of high alerts or things of that nature. So that's how we do it, and trying to achieve continuous compliance with our infrastructure, but it does require you know, a fair amount of maturity in the cloud to be able to get everything adhered to and standardized so that you can follow that model. But that's what I think a lot of customers in the cloud are trying to achieve.
And Eugenie, do you have anything to add to Gavin around this area?
Not really. So Gavin covered this very well.
Okay, no worries. So another question, and this could be for you, Eugenie, or it could also be, for you, Eugenie, sorry. What are the few tactics for keeping up with evolving technology while mitigating fraudulent transactions?
Sorry, can you please repeat?
Yeah, so what are the few tactics for keeping up with evolving technologies while trying to mitigate fraudulent transactions?
Well, again, that's mostly, I think that's a question for Gavin, because that's more related to retail and private banking, which I'm not part of, unfortunately.
Okay, no worries. Gavin, do you have anything to this question?
Yeah, evolving technologies can be a strain on any, you know, IT operations or, you know, security teams. But I think for fraudulent transactions, a lot of the new stuff that is, you know, available to us is the machine learning, anomaly detection, those types of things, and applying that to transactions that are happening within our environment. Those are items that we are leveraging, and those are a constant iterative process. You want to put modeling in place to be able to get a standard baseline for what normal transaction behavior looks like for a given user, and then you start to iterate on that. You start adding more data, and then anomalies can kind of present themselves. And with fraudulent transactions, this could be, I mean, this could be anything. This could be a sale of a security or a purchase of a security. This could be a debit card swipe, at a physical, POS location. This could be an online purchase to some degree. So you have to be able to pull in data from the merchant. You have to be able to pull in the securities in question. And it's kind of combining user behavior analytics. If you have some security folks on the call, they're aware of these technologies, but it's sort of applying it to the actual customer and looking at what a normal behavior looks like, so you can try to determine what's abnormal. But you need some help from data science. You need some data science models to be built, and then you have to start to work through supervised and unsupervised learning models, and then it starts to go and iterate from there as you start to collect more data about the customer.
Thank you. Well, time flies by, and we're about getting to the end. So one last question for you guys. Which international and national standards do you advise to use at this point? ISO, IEC, ANSI, NIST, etc. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe Eugenie, you can start on this, and then we can go to Gavin.
Well, here there is no silver bullet and one answer that can can cover everything. Actually, that's really depends on the industry and on the country which you want to apply this to. And probably Gavin can add, there are some specifics in Asia Pacific, in Singapore, there are some specifics in Germany, in Europe, and UK now, and there are a lot of specific in US standards. So there is no one answer for this, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And Gavin, do you have anything to add to this? Or?
Yeah, again, what Eugenia was saying, it's really going to depend on the jurisdiction that you're in. For multinational companies, that's going to cover a lot of different types of standards. We operate only in the United States, so standards like NIST, both their cybersecurity guidance as well as their 853 standards for federal government systems is definitely something to look at. ISO international standards is also I recommend it from a risk management perspective. It's going to combine not only your security posture, but it's going to bring in things like HR, and it's going to bring in your legal teams, and it's going to have a wider impact of the organization to be able to adopt those types of standards. But again, it's going to really be dependent on the industry that you're in, the jurisdiction that you're going to be servicing for customers. But those are the two that we leverage heavily.
Cool. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for participating. I've thought this has been a very interesting hour and some very good thoughts on some of the challenges and how you guys will solve them. So with that, we'll close out today's conversation, and back over to you, John.
All righty, thank you very much. Thanks to the moderators and the panelists for participating and sharing your thoughts and insights. Really interesting discussion. And thank you to everybody for attending today's event. Appreciate it. As we mentioned earlier, Humio will be donating $10 for every attendee of this roundtable to the Techstars Foundation. So by attending today's event, you've been able to help to provide funds for positive social and economic change and making innovation accessible to everyone anywhere. Thank you. At the end of the roundtable, there's going to be a survey question regarding the content of this presentation. So we'd appreciate your feedback if you have a second to fill that out before leaving. And if we didn't get to your question during the presentation, we'll follow up an email. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.